The wrench I threw into the lake cost me $41 at a hardware store in 1987. It sank into 11 feet of water off the end of my own dock in under 2 seconds. My grandson didn't dive after it. Nobody did. The strange thing is, just moments before, everyone standing on that dock had watched a 67-year-old man go completely, unnaturally still. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't clench a fist. Even as my fishing rod, the one my father handed down to me, snapped clean in half over somebody's knee, nobody in that family understood how a man could just stand there and take it. And nobody could have guessed that his stillness would end with a single throw into deep water. 20 years ago, if you'd told me I'd do something like that, I'd have laughed you off my porch. Because I've spent my whole life being the fella who untangles the mess, not the one who makes it worse. If you've ever gone quiet just to keep a family from cracking down the middle, if you've ever let something get broken enough times that you stopped feeling it break, then stay with me a minute, because this one's for you. Before I get going, do an old man a favor and hit that subscribe button, and tell me down in the comments what part of the country you're listening from tonight. All right. Let me tell you how a fishing rod ended up in 2 pieces on a dock in northern Michigan. My name is Everett Combs. I'm 67 years old, and I spent 38 years as a lineman for the power company up in Alpena, climbing poles in ice storms that would have sent a younger man home crying to his mother. Retired 6 years back with a fused shoulder, a limp I've mostly made peace with, and hands that still shake a little when the weather turns. I live on Birch Lake, in the cabin my father built log by log after he came home from Korea. My wife, Doreen, and I raised our daughter in that cabin every summer of her life. Doreen picked out the porch swing. I built the dock myself, 1 plank at a time, the summer Carol turned 9. The boathouse came later, 4 winters of side work rewiring barns for the Amish families, 2 towns over, just so we could keep a boat on this water without owing anybody a dime. Doreen passed 4 years ago this October. Pancreatic cancer. 9 weeks from the day the doctor said the word to the night I held her hand in that same cabin and felt her stop gripping mine back. Since then, the 4th of July at the lake has been the thing that keeps our family a family. Same dock, same grill, same lawn chairs. I've re-webbed twice with nylon cord from the hardware store. I still use her marinade, written on a card so faded I've had to trace over the letters in pencil just to keep reading it. Soy sauce, brown sugar, a splash of bourbon, and black pepper enough to make you sneeze. Every summer the smoke rolls up off those coals and I swear I can hear her laughing about something the neighbor's dog did. Grief doesn't leave you. It just moves in and starts paying rent. My daughter Carol almost never misses the 4th. She's 34, works as a hospital administrator 2 hours south in Saginaw. Sharp as a tack, good heart, used to be the kind of daughter who called just to tell you about her day. Somewhere in the last few years, though, she got tired of standing between her husband and her father, and she quietly stepped over to his side of the room. Trevor Aldrich, 36. Runs some kind of online consulting business I still can't explain to you if you paid me, drives a truck so tall I need a step stool to see in the window, wears sunglasses indoors, like the sun might sneak up on him through a ceiling. And I want to be fair here, I never once cared about any of that. Let a young man have his toys. What I cared about was the way he talked to people he considered smaller than him, especially anybody past 60. He never came at me straight on. Men like that never do. He worked in little digs. Everett, they make hearing aids that sync to your phone now, you know. That rod's older than my truck should be in a museum, not on a dock. Still using a paper map? There's a satellite for that now. Everybody'd give a polite little laugh. Carol would squeeze my elbow after. Dad, he's just teasing. Maybe. But teasing stops being teasing when it only ever lands on one man at the table and never once on the fella doing the landing. I let it go, year after year, for 2 reasons. Because I love my daughter more than I love my pride. And because in her last week, lying in that bed with the window open so she could smell the pines, Doreen made me swear I'd never let bitterness run our family off from that lake. I kept that promise longer than I probably should have. That 4th started about as good as a day can start. Real northern Michigan summer loons calling out on the water at dawn, a breeze coming off the lake just strong enough to keep the mosquitoes honest. I had a cooler of walleye Ernie Kowalczyk, and I had pulled out of the lake that very morning, cleaned and ready for the grill, alongside 4 bratwursts because my grandson Tyler won't touch fish yet, bless him. Carol brought her mother's potato salad, made from that same card, and it was close enough to the original that it put a lump in my throat before I'd even taken a bite. Trevor showed up 40 minutes late, hauling a cooler of some coconut water nobody but him would drink, looked at the walleye sizzling on the grill and said, "Still eating what you catch yourself, Everett? Bold move for a man your age. Bacteria doesn't care how many years of experience you've got." I told him some things are worth the risk. He laughed like he'd won something. I let it go, same as always. We sat down at the picnic table, and for a stretch there, it was good. Tyler, who's 7, was telling me about a snapping turtle he'd found down by the culvert, and I was asking him all the right questions, and I watched Carol's face soften up the way it used to when she was a girl herself. Then Trevor looked over at my plate. "That's a lot of fish for one man," he said. I told him I caught it, I'd eat it, and I reached for the tartar sauce. That's when he leaned across the table. I thought he wanted the bratwurst tray, and instead his forearm came down flat and hard across my plate. Fish, potato salad, sweet corn, every bit of it hit the planks of that dock with a sound I can still hear if I sit quiet enough. My fishing rod, leaned up against the table edge, went down with it and snapped clean under somebody's boot in the scramble. My plate lay there in pieces, mayonnaise and fish bones spread out across the wood my own hands had nailed down. Trevor looked at the mess for half a second, then shrugged, and delivered a line I'd bet money he'd been sitting on all day. "Guess it's a diet day, big guy. At your age, skipping a meal's practically a doctor's order." Nobody laughed. Not that time. His own folks stared hard at the tablecloth. Even Tyler went quiet, the way kids go quiet when they can feel something's wrong before they understand what. I pushed back from the table, my bad shoulder complaining the way it does, and stood up slow. And here's a thing I'll admit to you, because I promised myself I'd be honest tonight for one strange second. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was to apologize. To smooth things over so everybody else could breathe easy again while my dinner soaked into the boards of my own dock. Sit with that a second. He humiliated me, and my gut reaction was to fix his mood. That's what 4 decades of keeping the peace does to a man. It rewires the alarm system in your chest. If you've ever caught yourself saying sorry for somebody else's cruelty just so the room could start breathing again, then you already know exactly the wiring I'm describing. Then I noticed his phone sitting there on the table, one of those big shiny ones, laid out next to his coconut water like a little trophy. While he reached over to grab a bratwurst off the tray like nothing at all had happened, I walked over and I picked it up. He looked up, frowning. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer him, because there wasn't a single thing left in me worth saying out loud just yet. I took 9 slow steps down that dock. I counted them without meaning to the edge, out past where the water goes from green to black, and I opened my hand. 1 clean splash, 11 feet down. I turned around and gave him back his own words, near enough to word for word. "Guess it's a diet day for the phone, too." The silence held for maybe 3 full seconds. Then the whole dock came apart. Trevor sprinting to the edge of the water, hollering things I won't repeat in front of a boy Tyler's age, yanking his boat shoes off like volume alone could make electronics float back up. His mother gasped into her hand. His father just rubbed at his own forehead like he had a headache coming on. And my daughter, my Carol, turned on me with her eyes gone hard and said, "Dad, are you serious right now?" And there it was, the real wound of that whole afternoon, and it wasn't lying in pieces on the dock. My dinner was gone. My father's fishing rod was gone. Years of little digs were sitting there broken on the wood, same as the plate. And not once, not one single time did my daughter ask if I was all right. The only casualty she could see was that phone. I got my keys off the hook by the cabin door. Nobody so much as reached out a hand to stop me. Backing my truck down that gravel drive, I caught one last look in the mirror. Trevor still pacing the end of the dock, Carol standing there with her arms wrapped around herself. That broken rod lying right where it fell. I figured I'd feel guilty about halfway down the county road. Instead, I just felt tired. Not the old man kind of tired, the other kind. 20 minutes later, out on the highway with the windows down, her voicemail came through the truck speakers, her voice shaking. "Dad, you have no idea what you just started. I played it twice sitting in my own driveway before I went in." She was right. I didn't. But I was fixing to learn. For 2 days, not a soul came by. Nobody called to ask if I'd managed to scrape together a dinner after mine ended up on the dock boards. What I got instead was 3 text messages, and I want to read them to you in order, because the order is the whole story. Sunday night. "You need to replace his phone, Dad." Monday morning. "This is humiliating. His parents saw the whole thing." Monday afternoon, from Trevor himself, forwarded through Carol's phone. "If your father apologizes and covers the cost, We can put this behind us. Put this behind us. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee gone stone cold, reading those 3 messages over and over, doing the math on everything that wasn't in them. Not one, "Are you okay, Dad?" Not one, "What happened before that?" The cabin gets quiet in a particular way when you've filled it with somebody for 30-some years, and then all at once you haven't. The old refrigerator hummed. The porch swing knocked once against the rail out back when the wind caught it. Doreen used to holler that I'd better tie that thing down before it ended up in the lake. I almost smiled at the thought. Then I didn't. Her chair still sat across from mine at that table. Same worn cushion, same little scratch on the leg from where Carol dragged it across the linoleum as a girl trying to reach the cookie jar. I know people who clear a house out after they lose somebody, repaint, box everything up, start fresh. I never could manage it. Every corner of that cabin still had Doreen sitting in it somewhere. Her recipe box by the stove, the loon calendar tacked up by the back door, the dented old percolator she swore made better coffee than any fancy machine Carol ever bought her for Christmas. And now my own family had gone and made me feel like a guest, standing in the middle of the life Doreen and I built out of overtime pay and second-hand lumber. By Tuesday, the internet had done what the internet does. A cousin of Trevor's posted something online about senior citizens who can't manage their tempers anymore. His mother shared some little inspirational quote about grace and forgiveness. And one of Carol's coworkers left a comment I read maybe a dozen times. Some people just get mean once they get old. Mean. I turned that word over in my head for the better part of an afternoon. Then I did what old linemen do when the feelings get too loud to hold on to with bare hands. I went and found something broken to fix. The hinge on the boathouse door had been sticking since spring thaw. I sat down on an overturned bucket, took the whole thing apart, dropped one tiny screw, and spent 10 minutes on my knees hunting for it under the workbench, muttering words Doreen would have fined me a quarter for. And the whole time, the same picture kept looping behind my eyes, the plate cracking, the rod snapping, Trevor shrugging, Carol's eyes gone hard. Around 3 that afternoon, Ernie Kowalczyk appeared in the open boathouse door. Ernie's 74, retired from the county road crew, walks a 3-legged beagle named Diesel twice a day whether that dog's in the mood or not. He'd been out on that dock every 4th of July since Doreen passed, always showing up with a bag of sweet corn from his own garden and some story about how he'd grown twice what he needed again this year. "You busy?" he asked. I held up the hinge, trying to save a $9 part from an early retirement. He nodded like that, answered something, stepped inside, and put his hands down in his coat pockets, which worried me some, because Ernie Kowalczyk is a man who'll talk your ear clean off about lake levels for 20 minutes straight, and right then he looked like he'd rather be standing anywhere else on earth. "Been chewing on Sunday," he said. I told him hadn't we all. He didn't smile back at that. "Everett, that wasn't an accident." I stopped turning the screwdriver. "I know," I said. "No," he said. "I mean, I watched it clean as anything. He looked right at your plate first. Then he swung. Something cold walked straight through my chest right then. Suspecting a thing is one weight. Hearing another man say it plain out loud is a different one entirely." Then Ernie glanced toward the driveway like he half expected that oversized truck to come rolling back up it, took a breath, and gave me the rest. "Back in May," he said, "I was walking Diesel past the end of your road. Trevor was standing out front of the hardware store with 2 other fellas, business types, sounded like they were having themselves a good laugh about something. I only caught one piece of it clear." "What piece?" I asked. And my neighbor of near 30 years looked me square in the eye and repeated my son-in-law's own words back to me. "Once the old man's in a home, that lakefront's my down payment on the place up in Charlevoix." For a second I honestly thought I'd misheard him. My hearing's not what it used to be, especially in a noisy room. But we were standing 3 feet apart in a dead quiet boathouse, and I'd caught every single word plain as day. I laughed once, not because a single thing about it was funny, but because my body plane didn't know what else to do with a thing like that. My cabin. The cabin where Carol learned to swim off that very dock. The cabin where Doreen took her last breath with the window cracked open for the pine smell, already itemized. Already assigned a line on somebody else's spreadsheet for a cabin up north. He was just sitting around waiting on the vacancy. That night I didn't sleep hardly at all. I sat up at the kitchen table with an old photo album and took the whole tour. Carol at 5, missing her front teeth, holding up a lopsided Father's Day card made out of macaroni. Carol at 15, rolling her eyes at some school dance photo. Carol at 23, laughing next to her mother out on that same dock, at something I've long since forgotten the joke to. Then the newer pages started. Carol and Trevor at Christmas. Carol and Trevor at Thanksgiving. Carol and Trevor standing in my own kitchen, his arms slung around her waist, his smile switched on like a porch light. And me, off somewhere at the edge of near every frame, half cropped out more often than not, usually the one holding the camera. I ran my thumb across Doreen's face in one old photograph and asked the empty room, did I miss it? I don't rightly know who I was asking. God, myself, her, probably all three at once. Had I gotten so scared of losing my daughter that I'd made myself smaller and smaller just to keep fitting into the corner of my own family's picture? I picked up the phone to call her. My thumb hovered right over her name. Then I heard that voicemail again in my head. You have no idea what you just started. And I set the phone back down, and I made the first decision in years that had nothing whatsoever to do with keeping somebody else comfortable. No yelling, no begging, no posting anything online to defend myself. I was going to pay attention. Quiet, careful attention, the way you listen to a transformer that's fixing to tell you exactly what's wrong with it before it blows. Because if Trevor believed that getting older made a man harmless, he was confusing quiet with weak. And no man who spent 38 years climbing poles and ice storms confuses quiet with off. After Ernie's visit, I stopped seeing Trevor as simply rude and started seeing him as employed. Every little compliment landed on a schedule now. Every favor he offered was an invoice waiting on a due date. I told not one soul what I knew. I confronted nobody. From the outside, my life looked exactly the same as it always had. On the inside, I was running a full diagnostic. The first pattern showed up quick. My future had suddenly turned into everybody's favorite topic of conversation. Carol stopped by one Thursday in her scrubs, 2 coffees in hand. And for a good half an hour, it was wonderful. A patient she'd helped get discharged, my tomato plants out back, the raccoon that's been raiding Ernie's garden 2 summers running. It felt like it used to feel. Then, stirring her coffee without looking up at me, she said, "Have you given any thought to something smaller, Dad? Maybe closer to town?" I watched her over the rim of my mug. "This place is a lot of upkeep for one man," she said. "It keeps me busy," I told her. "Your knee, the dock steps in the winter." "I appreciate you worrying," I said. And then it came, easy as a weather report. "Do you still know where the original deed is, just in case?" There it was. Not loud, not dramatic. Just set down on the table between us, same as the sugar bowl. Somewhere. I said, easy as anything, and gave her nothing more. And I watched a little flicker of disappointment cross my daughter's face, a flicker I'd have missed clean a month before. Doreen always used to say Carol couldn't tell a lie to save her life. Turned out she wasn't a whole lot better at hiding when somebody'd handed her an assignment either. The next weekend, Trevor showed up carrying a bottle of something that cost more than a week of my groceries. First gift he'd given me in 8 years of marriage to my daughter that wasn't dressed up as an opinion. He praised the walleye, asked after the truck. Offered to come haul my dock out for the winter with his equipment, quick as anything, no trouble at all. "I'm good," I told him. "I've hauled that dock myself 20-some years." And I caught at the quick, flat look he traded with Carol, that look married folks share when a script's gone sideways on them. That look bothered me a good deal more than any insult ever had, because insults are weather, but a look like that is climate. A week after, he tried again, wandering up while I had the truck jacked, and was under there changing the oil myself. "You still do all this yourself, huh? Enjoy it," I said. "You know, property up this way is bringing crazy money right now, if you ever wanted to simplify things. Something smaller, maybe down south for the winters." "Not much of a snowbird," I said, and kept right on wrenching. He laughed that laugh he does for clients. "Well, you won't want to keep all this up forever." I slid out from under the truck and looked at him a second longer than was comfortable for either of us. "Trevor, I've had this land 40-some years. The day I don't want it anymore, you'll be the very first to know." His smile went a little stiff around the corners. "Fair enough," he said, and left inside of 5 minutes. That conversation stuck with me longer than it should have, not because it scared me, but because it sounded rehearsed, like a pitch he'd practiced out loud in his truck on the drive over. The following week I had an ordinary appointment with Rita Sandoval, my attorney of better than 20 years, the woman who'd handled every bit of Doreen's estate, who'd once beaten me at cribbage so bad we agreed never to speak of it again. I'd come in just to update a beneficiary form, routine as anything. Rita finished up the paperwork, slid the folder across the desk, then leaned back in her chair. "I've been going back and forth on whether to tell you something," she said. My stomach went tight. "Go on then. Your son-in-law called this office a few months back." About what? He didn't ask about your file, she said, careful. He asked general questions. What kind of general? The kind folks ask, she said, when they're worried about aging parents. Wanted to understand how guardianship works. What happens when a homeowner's judged, unable to manage his own finances. Whether moving into assisted living changes who holds title to a piece of property. My jaw had gone tight enough to crack a walnut sideways. What'd you tell him? The only thing I legally could, Rita said, with the ghost of a smile. Nothing. He never once said your name. He didn't have to, I said. We sat with that a minute, two old professionals reading the same page from opposite ends of the table. Finally, she said, Everett, I don't like assuming the worst about anybody's family. Neither do I said. But those aren't curiosity questions. No, she agreed. Those are logistics. I drove home slow that evening. Not on account of traffic, but because every mile dissolved one more excuse I'd been propping up for 6 years running. Maybe he didn't mean anything by it. Maybe it's just his sense of humor. Maybe Carol will finally put a stop to it. Maybe I'm just getting too sensitive in my old age. One by one, every last one of them fell away. That night I stood out in the boathouse, my favorite room on the whole property. Tools all hung right where my hands expect to find them. An old Michigan plate nailed up on the wall, and I picked up the framed photograph from our 25th anniversary. Doreen laughing because I'd burned the first batch of walleye clean to charcoal. I ran my thumb over the glass and said it out loud to nobody. They think getting old means getting easy to move. The boathouse didn't answer me back. But somehow, I swear, she did anyway. Next morning I called Rita before 8. I want to make some changes, I said. What kind? She asked. The kind, I told her, that make good and sure nobody ever again mistakes my kindness for a signature. She was quiet a second, then said she'd clear her afternoon for me. Here's what surprised me most through all of it. The paperwork was never about revenge, and Rita never once treated it that way. She asked me one question partway through that reframed the whole business for me. What outcome lets you sleep at night, Everett? And I thought on it honest and said, I don't want to punish a soul. I just never again want somebody planning out my life without asking the man who's living it. So that's what we built, across 2 meetings and a sit-down with a financial planner, a revocable trust, an independent trustee with no family ties and no favors owed to anybody, updated medical directives, powers of attorney rewritten clean, every last document saying the same quiet sentence in legal language. Nobody steps in over Everett Combs because they've decided on his behalf that they know best. No traps set, no recordings made, no theatrics whatsoever. Just a grown man locking his own doors properly for the first time in years. And I'll tell you something strange. The day those papers got signed, Trevor got smaller in my head. For the first time in months, my whole world grew back out past the edges of him. Ernie showed up one Saturday not long after with 2 coffees and a single question. You still got that old 16-foot Lund up on blocks behind the boathouse? Needs a whole new transom, I told him. There's a fishing derby out on Hubbard Lake come September, he said, and shrugged the particular way men our age shrug when they're being careful with each other's loneliness. Might be time. I nearly said no clean out of habit. Then I heard Doreen just as clear as the radio. You're allowed a hobby too, Everett Combs. So the 2 of us spent better part of 3 Saturdays with that transom, drinking gas station coffee, arguing with strangers about outboard motors like it was foreign policy. Nobody there asked what phone I carried. Nobody priced my truck. One old fella spent a solid 20 minutes telling me about teaching his granddaughter to cast a line. Another told me to stop by his shop any time, and meant every word of it. Driving home that first Saturday, I realized I'd laughed more in 4 hours than I had in the 4 months previous. The week after that, I started volunteering Tuesdays down at the VFW hall, helping a couple of the younger vets get their old trucks running again, brakes, alternators, the occasional bad starter. I came home covered in grease every Tuesday night and a little lighter every Wednesday morning. Funny thing about helping a stranger, it reminds you you're still worth something at the exact moment your own family seems to have forgotten it. A month or so after the 4th, Carol called. Where have you been? She asked. Around, I said. You've been hard to get hold of. Been busy. Doing what? A little fishing. A little wrenching on trucks that aren't mine. A pause on her end. You never told me any of that. You never asked, I said. Silence. Not an angry silence. Just an unfamiliar one. For 30-some years I'd arranged my whole life around everybody else's calendar. Now they'd have to go and find room in mine. Neither one of us knew that new dance step yet. One evening after supper, without exactly planning to, I pulled a yellow legal pad across the table and wrote my daughter a letter. Not an angry one, not a lawyer's letter. The true one about her mother, about how scared I'd been every day since we lost her, about why I kept swallowing every little cut because somewhere along the way I'd convinced myself that standing up for my own self was the same thing as losing my daughter for good. And near the bottom, my pen wrote out a line that surprised even me as I wrote it. I never needed you to choose between your husband and your father. I only needed you to notice when somebody treated your father like he didn't matter. I sat there staring at that line a long while, because it was true, and true things carry a certain weight to them. Then I folded it up, sealed the envelope, wrote her name across the front, and set it in the top drawer of the desk. She wasn't ready for it yet. Maybe I wasn't either. A few days on, Ernie leaned up against my fence while I was hosing down the truck. "You hear the latest?" he asked. "Your boy's telling folks around town you've gone erratic." I laughed out loud at that. "That's a new one," Ernie grinned. "Best part, he's organizing himself a whole family sit-down. Says he wants to clear the air." Neither one of us believed that for one single second. 2 nights later, Carol called, her voice careful as a woman walking on river ice. "Trevor wants everybody together Saturday. Get things settled once and for all. Will you come?" I looked out across the yard at the lake, going orange with the evening, the dock throwing its long shadow out across the water, and I noticed something remarkable. I wasn't dreading it one bit. I wasn't going there to defend myself or argue my case or audition for anybody's respect. That season of my life was already over. "I'll be there," I said, calm as a Sunday morning. She let out a breath. "Thank you." And then I made one more call. "Rita, I think it's time." She didn't ask time for what. She just said, "I'll meet you there. Now slow down here with me a minute, because this next part I've turned over in my head 100 times since, and you've earned every second of it same as I have." Saturday came in warm and bright, the kind of day made for a lake and a grill, and instead I drove into town, with my attorney's sedan trailing me in the mirror the whole way, and the strangest passenger rode along in that truck cab with me. Peace. A month before, I'd have rehearsed my whole argument the entire drive down. This time there was nothing left in me to rehearse. The truth doesn't need a dress rehearsal. Rita stepped out with her slim briefcase and asked if I was ready. "Remember," she said, "we're not here to fight anybody." "I know it," I told her. "We're just done pretending." Carol and Trevor's place sits up on a hill outside of town, a big place Trevor likes calling his dream house, and usually forgets to mention which bank's doing most of the actual dreaming. Inside, the whole crowd was already gathered. Carol, Trevor, his parents, my sister down from Petoskey, my nephew. Even Ernie, invited I'd learn later because Trevor had heard he'd witnessed the whole thing at the lake and figured he'd best get him managed too. The room went dead quiet the second we walked in. Trevor clocked Rita right off and let out a laugh. "You brought a lawyer? Seriously?" I smiled, polite as anything. "I brought a woman who's very good with paperwork." His grin only widened. "Wow. Real dramatic, Everett." Rita shook every hand in the room, calm as a Tuesday afternoon. Carol's eyes were searching my face the whole time. "Dad, what is this?" "I believe," I said. Trevor wanted to clear the air. "I do," Trevor announced, planting himself square in front of the fireplace, hands shoved in his pockets, hosting his own intervention like it was a real estate open house. "We've all been uncomfortable since the lake thing." He looked around the room. "I think Everett owes everybody here an apology." Everett, not Dad, not even Mr. Combs. Funny how respect walks itself right out of a family one word at a time. Rita glanced my way. I gave her the smallest nod, and the briefcase came open. "What's that?" Trevor said, still smiling, though it had gone a little thin. Rita's voice was the same one I'd heard across her desk for 20 years running. Level, unhurried, inevitable as weather. "Mr. Combs asked me here today because certain misunderstandings have developed concerning his estate and his future." Trevor laughed once. "What estate?" Rita didn't so much as look up. "Over the past several weeks, we've finalized a comprehensive plan. One folder, set down on the coffee table. A revocable living trust. A second folder, updated medical directives. A third, revised powers of attorney. And an independent professional trustee, unconnected to the family." The temperature in that room changed all at once. Carol blinked. "You did all that?" "Yes," I said. "I didn't know," she said. "I know you didn't," I said, gentle as I could manage. Trevor crossed his arms tight over his chest. I don't see why we need to be discussing any of this here. Rita looked at him direct for the first time all afternoon. I think you do. And right then, for the first time all afternoon, Trevor's smile finally quit. Rita folded her hands together on her knee. Some months back, she said, a caller reached out to my office, asking general questions. Carol turned. What questions? Rita kept her eyes right on Trevor. About guardianship. About how elderly homeowners lose control of their own finances. About whether entering assisted living changes ownership of a piece of property. Not one soul in that room breathed. Carol's head swung slow toward her husband. You called my father's lawyer. Those were hypothetical, Trevor said, a shade too fast. I'm sure they were, Rita said, pleasant as ever. I work in finance, Trevor said, louder now. People ask me things like that all the time. Plenty of people work in finance, Rita agreed. Not many of them phone their father-in-law's personal attorney to ask how an old man loses his house. Nobody in that room so much as breathed. Trevor's father studied the carpet like it owed him money. His mother's hands went white in her lap. And my daughter stood there staring at her husband like a stranger had just unzipped his face right in front of her. Why? She whispered. Trevor threw both hands up. You're all blowing this way out of proportion. I was planning ahead. For what? Carol said, and her voice cracked clean down the middle. For our future. And my daughter took one slow step back, physically back, away from her own husband, and said the sentence I expect I'll carry with me the rest of my days. My father's future is not your financial plan. The ceiling fan turned overhead. Not one person in that room moved a muscle. Trevor scanned the room, hunting for backup his folks, my sister, my nephew, and found nothing waiting for him but floorboards and folded hands. And that's when Ernie Kowalczyk cleared his throat from the corner of the room. I saw the plate, he said. Every head in that house turned at once. That wasn't any accident. That's ridiculous, Trevor snapped. Ernie didn't so much as raise his voice. Men like Ernie never do need to. I've known Everett 30 years, he said, looking Trevor dead in the eye. You looked right at his plate, then you swung your arm. And into the longest silence of that whole afternoon, Ernie went ahead and added the rest. And I heard you talking back in May, out front of the hardware store. Trevor's face lost its color by degrees, like somebody dimming a lamp. Once the old man's in a home, Ernie recited, word for word, that lakefront's my down payment on the place up in Charlevoix. Carol turned back to her husband one final time, and her voice came out barely above a whisper. You told me that was a joke. It was everybody's blowing this out of all proportion. No, she breathed. It wasn't. And that's when I stood up. Not out of anger, because I wanted the whole room to hear every word of it at ordinary conversational volume. I didn't come here today to embarrass a single soul, I said. I came because I spent 40 years building a life on that lake with my wife. I looked over at my daughter. I wanted my retirement to be fishing, Cincy and old trucks, and the 4th of July with you and your boy. Instead, I found myself having to check whether I needed to defend my own front door. Nobody said a word to interrupt me. I never much cared about that phone, I said, turning toward Trevor. I cared that you found humiliating me funny. And I cared even more, and this part's for everybody in this room, that somewhere along the way, I'd started believing that keeping the peace meant putting up with disrespect. I was wrong about that. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, and it wasn't tense either. It was just honest. Likely the first fully honest silence that family had shared together in years. Rita quietly clicked her briefcase shut. I believe our business here is concluded, she said. Not one person tried to stop us at the door. Behind me, Carol said one single word. Dad. I turned, and my daughter stood there with what looked like 100 sentences jammed up in her throat, not one of them able to move. And then she just started to cry. I gave her the smallest, saddest smile I had in me, and walked on out into the sunlight. Out in the driveway, Rita asked how I was feeling. I started up the truck and hunted around for the right word. Lighter, I finally said. She nodded like a woman who'd seen exactly that happen plenty of times before. That's what happens, she said, when folks finally set down the things that were never really theirs to carry in the first place. I drove home with the windows down for the first time in longer than I could rightly remember. And here's the lesson that whole afternoon left me with, the one I want you to carry out of here tonight, even if you forget every other word of this story. The mistake most people make is believing boundaries are walls you build up against the people you love. They're not walls at all. They're the paperwork of self-respect. And the folks who get angriest about them are always, always the ones who had plans laid for your open door. Life didn't turn to glass and sunshine after that meeting, not by a long shot. Real life never does work that way. I still woke up at 5:30 most mornings. My knee still complained something fierce on the boathouse steps. Doreen's chair still sat there empty across the kitchen table, same as ever. Some things don't change simply because you finally told somebody the truth. 3 days after that meeting, Carol called. I let it ring on through, not out of punishment. I just plain didn't have the words yet and went out and mowed the lawn instead. A week after that, she came and knocked on my door. Looked wrung clean out. Dark circles under her eyes, hair yanked back in a hurry. Not a bit of armor left on her anywhere. Looked like the little girl who used to come home swallowing back tears after losing a softball game. "Can I come in?" Of course she could. I put on coffee. She sat down in Doreen's chair without even thinking about it, then froze up solid. "I'm sorry," she said. "It's all right," I told her, and I meant it. We let that coffee sit there 5 whole minutes without either of us touching it. Then, "I didn't know, Dad. I believe you," I said, and I watched her make up her mind to be braver than that. "But that's not the whole truth," she said, staring down into her cup. "I saw the little jokes. I heard the comments. I just kept telling myself they were small." "They were," I said, soft as I could manage. "One at a time." She looked up at me. "But put together, they were a direction." Her eyes went wet. "I should have put a stop to it years back." And I set my hand down over hers there on my own kitchen table and told her the truest thing I had left in me. "You loved your husband." "I still do," she whispered. "I know it," I said, "and I love you." "I know that too," she said, and cried the quiet kind of crying that only comes from finally setting a heavy load down. When she left that day, she hugged me harder than she had in years, and I let myself hope right then that we'd turned some kind of corner. We hadn't, not yet. 2 weeks on, she was back, angry this time, not with me exactly, but with the wreckage of the whole thing. "Trevor says everybody ganged up on him." I nodded along. "He says Ernie exaggerated." "I'm sure he does. He says your lawyer ambushed him." I didn't say anything to that one at all. And then the question she'd actually driven all that way to ask me. "Can't we just move past all of it?" I looked at my daughter a good long while. Then I got up, walked over to the desk, opened that top drawer, and took out the envelope with her name written across the front. "I wrote you this," I said. She reached out for it, and I drew it back gentle. "Not yet." Her face fell clean through the floor. "Dad, why not?" "Because you're not ready for it," I said. "And because right now, sweetheart, you're still busy managing everybody else's pain except your own." She wiped at her eyes. "I don't know what to do. You don't have to solve it today," I said. She hugged me at the door on her way out, and neither one of us said his name once. Another month rolled by. Summer leaned on over toward fall. The birches along the shoreline started turning gold at the edges. Tuesdays still belonged to the VFW garage. Saturdays belonged to fishing derbies and coffee with Ernie. And for the first time since Doreen passed, I found I wasn't just passing my time anymore. I was spending it. Then, one cool September afternoon, a third knock came at my door. Carol stood out on the porch alone, and something in her face had settled calmer, older, cleaner somehow. She sat down across from me and said 2 words. I left. I didn't ask her for the particulars. She gave me the one that mattered anyway, all on her own. I asked him one single question, she said. Whether he'd have treated you that way if Mom were still alive to see it? She smiled, the saddest little smile I believe I've ever seen on her face. He couldn't answer me, Dad. Not one word. I closed my eyes a second, mostly for Doreen, and then Carol said the sentence that told me my daughter had come all the way back home to me. I spent years telling myself I was keeping the peace, she said, but all I was really doing was asking you to carry every bit of it alone. And then she surprised me. She got up, walked over to my refrigerator, and pulled out a butcher paper package. 2 good walleye fillets. Stopped by the bait shop on the way over, she said. You planning on cooking supper? I asked her. If you'll let me help, she said. And for the first time since her mother died, somebody stood right there beside me at that grill, instead of waiting on me over at the table. The coals crackled away. The fat started talking the way it does. And my daughter reached over for the recipe box, pulled her mother's card out, and squinted down at that faded pencil tracing. Bourbon goes in before the soy sauce, right? Right, I said. Your mother would be awful proud of you, and my voice didn't hold up entirely steady on that one. She laughed through her tears. I finally understand why these 4th of Julys mattered so much to you. So do I told her. Now, more than ever. When supper was ready, she carried my plate out to me herself, careful with both hands, set it down right in front of me, looked me straight in the eye, and said 6 words. Eat it while it's hot, Dad. I don't believe she'll ever know the true size of that little sentence. Months before, somebody had knocked my dinner clean onto a dock to show a whole family what he figured I was worth. Now here was my daughter, standing guard over my plate like it mattered. No speech to it, no ceremony, just respect, served up warm. Sometimes that's the whole banquet, right there. She and Trevor divorced quiet the following spring. No courtroom fireworks, no celebrating on my end, either, if I'm honest with you. No father alive dreams of his daughter's marriage coming apart. But I'd learned something by then that can't ever be unlearned. A family can't hold together when the respect only ever flows in one direction. These days, the 4th of July still happens out on that lake. Guest list is a good deal shorter now. Some years it's just Carol and me and her boy Tyler. Some years Ernie wanders on over, or 1 or 2 of the fellas from the VFW garage stop by after the parade downtown. Table's not as full as it used to run. But the laughing is real, and not one soul sitting at it is putting on a show for anybody else. Every so often I'll catch myself looking out at the deep end past my dock. The phone's long gone, and good riddance to it. What stayed with me wasn't the splash. It was everything I finally came to understand after it. I used to believe protecting my family meant swallowing down whatever they handed me. I don't believe that one bit anymore. Getting older doesn't make a man worth less. It just means you've logged enough miles to finally tell love apart from obligation. And once you can tell those 2 things apart, friend, the whole road gets a good deal lighter under your tires. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to actually go and do this week, and it won't cost you a nickel. Next time somebody's little joke lands on you, same target as always. Say one calm sentence back, out loud. That one lands on me, not with me. Once. No anger behind it, just information. You'll learn everything you need to know from whatever happens next. And here's the question I'll leave sitting on your table tonight, the one I chewed on myself for 6 years too long. How much of what you've been calling keeping the peace was really just you keeping quiet? Now it's your turn, because I've second-guessed that splash 100 times over myself. Put a 1 down in the comments if you figure that phone in the lake was exactly the right call, one quiet answer to years and years of noise. Put a 2 if you think I should have used plain words that day, instead of a few $100s of somebody's electronics doing my talking for me. Put a 3 if you think I waited a good deal too long, and the real mistake was 6 years of swallowed jokes before I ever got there. Some nights I'd vote 3 myself, if I'm being honest with you. Tell me whereabouts you're listening from tonight, and what time it's showing on your clock. It still amazes this old man how far a story off a little lake up north can travel. And if you've ever been the one at the table everybody's just kidding about, or the parent whose own kids forgot to ask if you were all right, tell me about it down below. Somebody out there tonight is rehearsing an apology for something that got done to them, and they need to hear, from one of their own, that they're allowed to set it down for good. If this one meant something to you, go on and subscribe, and stick around a while longer. I've got a lifetime of these stories left in me, and this little corner of the internet only keeps its porch light burning because folks like you keep finding your way back to it. Thank you, truly, for sitting up with an old man tonight. I'll see you in the next one.